Part 2 of For the Request of Max by Knial Piper II. Then, I heard something say my name. Max. The voice whispered. I was so frightened by that voice that I became still. And not still as in staying in one place, but still as in stuck in that place. The frightening thing about it all is that to this day, I believe that stillness was brought on, not by the level of my fright, but by something down there. It was doing these things to me. It held me there, that thing in the basement. My hand never left the doorknob. I heard it crawling up the stairs, in the shadows. Then, as it got closer, I heard it say again, Max. That sound pierced my soul in a way I can't describe. The cold air was there upon me again. The stench was stronger than ever. And at the end of the shadows, I saw something strange. I saw a white something breach the light. It wasn't a hand and it wasn't a foot. I think it might have been something's head. I would have cried out in terror if it was not so consuming me. My eyes opened wider as I felt it ready to come at me. My jaw almost dropped. If it would have allowed me to do so, I took a kind of backwards breath and the door slammed. I felt released. My hand was ripped from the doorknob and the bang of the door slamming echoed through the castle. I looked up from behind me and there was Father looking down. Father looked down at me with his stern look of approval. I had never seen my father show such emotion. It may have been a cold stare, but it had intention behind it. My father was upset with me. Max, did you see what you came to see? I can remember feeling overwhelmed and confused by that statement. Did he know something was down there? I couldn't speak. I just let my bottom lip tremble and I began to cry. Go to bed, Max. I would never attempt to go back down there ever again. In fact, I never passed the door if I didn't have to. I only entered the kitchen by way of the living room. I didn't talk about it. I didn't think about it. Actually, until now, I've never even mentioned it to anyone. My father also never talked of it. That was almost 20 years ago. Now the floor was bare. There were no rugs or furniture besides the table and the vase with the dead flowers out front. There was a rat. I could hear it in the kitchen behind the stairs, but the whole house was bare. Not naked, but missing the things that made it feel like home. Now it was just the old stone castle with dead flowers. And that dark green door. The door looked to be suffering from time. There was cracks so large a golf ball could fit between them. Some ran from the base of the door up to just below the doorknob. There was dust upon the standard rectangular design that was etched into the door itself, and splintered wood all about it. It looked as though it might fall apart at any second should I touch it. When I opened it, I was afraid I might pull the doorknob from the door itself, but this didn't happen. I pulled the basement door and looked down into the darkness. The air and stench came back. But they felt more subtle than I had remembered. I had perhaps played the tape over so many times in my head over the past 20 years that a small fish had now become a much larger one. Much, much larger one. Like so many years ago, the blackness felt alive. Perhaps what I had seen was nothing but something. I felt my toes grow anxious inside my boots. I might have had a nervous twitch at the time because something I did scared up a rat, and it ran from the kitchen to the bathroom behind me. It scared the hell out of me, the bloody hell out of me. I jumped and almost tripped, but instead caught myself on the solid stone of the doorway. I tried to steady my balance and was forced to place a foot elsewhere. That displaced foot breached the doorway and landed on the first step. I stopped and held my breath. For a long moment, I waited to hear something. Whatever was down there, was it still there? Did it hear me? If it was down there, I had made myself known. I would commit to the action now and holler, "Hello?" I heard nothing from the black. I felt a bit stupid to be in this position, a grown man scared of dark shadows. So frightened was I that I was shouting into the darkness for monsters to reveal themselves. I shook my head. Look at me. I am acting childish, I think I said to myself at the time. I took a deep breath and put both feet inside. I looked back at the open door. It was halfway open. I thought of propping it open completely. I would hate to get locked down here. But I could certainly break out. That door was doing no one any good. So I began to step. Each step got easier, until I was on the edge of darkness. This was challenging for me, mentally. almost as mentally as that first step was. I looked back at the dim light provided by the lowering sun outside. I stepped into the black. Immediately, I felt something staring at me. I made several steady steps, moving cautiously through the dark. I knew there was a light in the basement because I had seen it under the door when Father spent his time down here. I found about 6 more steps before the stairway ended. Underneath was solid concrete, with what felt to be hay under my feet. It slid around under the steps. It crinkled and crunched under my foot. I reached my hand out to the front wall to feel for some kind of light switch. My fingers ran over the cold stone almost frantically. I felt something coming close behind me. I began breathing deep. Then something grazed my ear. I jerked back my head and heard it jangling. It was a pull string to the light. I quickly found the swinging metal balled string and pulled it. The light didn't come on. Oh, I felt something behind me again. I pulled it again, and the light nearly blinded me. I turned around, squinting from the fluorescence, and saw nothing. I was scaring myself to death. I held my chest as one does when they're trying to steady their heart rate and breathing. I was literally panting. Yet I believe a person in my situation would probably be quite the same. Looking around the room, I found the basement strangely empty. I had never been down here. I was aware that at one time there was furniture, but it had been removed and sold in the auction. There wasn't much recovered. The men seemed to go up and down the steps without worry or concern, but they did find it concerning that I would have no part with the basement. They thought my inaction with this was quite strange. They thought me a loon for instructing them on how to enter and leave the basement with such care without physically showing them the layout themselves. They brought up a few pictures, a box or two, and a chair. I began to wonder what the hell my father did down there. But I try to strike those thoughts and memories as they arrive. With the stairway built into the middle of the room, the basement itself existed as a donut-shaped area. I walked slowly around the corner to the stairway to see the other side of the room, hidden in the shadows of the light. The basement was empty, nothing but rough stones and mortar. There was straw and hay laid about on the floor with dust, but nothing excessive. The cold was beginning to feel sharp. I warmed my arms by rubbing them together, up and down with my hands, but I stepped into the dim shadows behind the stairway. I looked, expecting to find something. I was strangely disappointed. There was no creature in this room, but behind the stairway, there was a small window-like opening in the wall. It seemed a peculiar place for such an opening. I looked in it from afar. There was just more darkness in its depths, but at the bottom of this small 3-foot square in the wall was a small chest. There, almost hidden in clear sight, just 4 feet up from the dusty floor, was this wooden chest. It sat on a ledge of this window as if it were waiting for me. It was roughly 1 foot tall and 1.5 feet wide. It fit into the window just perfectly. On the outside of the dark brown wood were etchings. These were not carefully manufactured etchings, but carved almost negligently into the wood. There were 20 or so of these careless carvings. They were symbols I had never seen before. One appeared to be a reversed question mark with a strike through it. Another was 3 circles intertwined with one another. The closer I got to looking at the box, the more I lost sight of my adolescent fears. How could they have missed this? It was right out in the open. The movers didn't grab this box. The only way this could be here, was if someone came in after the auction and sat it here, but I had the only key. As I came close, I felt coldness. I ran my hand over the top of the chest. I felt the cold air coming from the deepness of that window. Picking up the small box felt like the greatest achievement I had ever conquered. It felt heavy, and there was something loose in it. Whatever was inside kind of rolled around, but it was too large to make a complete rotation inside the confines of the box. I stepped back quickly for fear of the strange window. I stepped back into the light of the hanging bulb and sat there with that box on the ground. Examining the box, I saw below it a symbol that appeared to spell the words Vompa. I located the metal latch just below that word. It was strong black steel and fashioned by an experienced blacksmith. That was apparent. There was, however, no lock. So I flipped the latch and it sprung to an open position. I thought of all the wild objects that might be in this box. My father had many rarities about him, but whatever was in that box was beyond me. Well, my father did die. His body was cremated and given to an undisclosed friend who scattered his ashes somewhere. I had never actually seen what happened to my father's body. I am not even entirely sure how he died. I was told one day that he had a heart attack, but I just remember one day he stopped coming around. Maybe this was his ashes. Maybe in this box held his remains. It was not out of the question. The word of my father rang in my head. Max, go to bed. I placed my hands on the wood and lifted its top. Max, go to bed. When I had opened the box, what I saw perplexed me. There was a depth in this box, but there was nothing. There was nothing in the box. I held it up and shook it, but it felt lighter. There was nothing in the box. I was for sure I felt something in that box. It had been rolling around. I shook my head and looked at the empty box. I left it open and stood up. I scratched my head, trying to run through all the plausible explanations, but none came to mind. I turned around and looked at the window in the wall. I stepped to the window and stood before it. It too embodied that strange darkness that only existed in this basement. I looked deep into the black, hoping to see something. I leaned over to get a better look. Then finally I dedicated myself and placed my hand into the window. I fit my head and hand into the window, but still nothing. I pushed as hard as I could, but still I could reach nothing but cold air. I needed a flashlight, I came to conclude. I stepped back and placed my hands on my hips. I turned for the stairway when I heard it. Max, it whispered. My eyes grew wide. I stopped, my eyebrows raised. I dared not turn back to the window. Whatever had called my name was in there. I heard it from the window. Max. I knew that voice. I turned around slowly. Staring in fright at the window, I heard an odd, indescribable noise coming from its depths. Then, like tentacles, several long blonde hairs rolled from the window. They crawled across the stone like a living creature. Then more hairs came. Then, soon enough, the entire window sill was covered in bright white hairs. There was so much of it that the window was no longer visible. They gripped the stone, then a hand shot out from between them. It reached out, just as my hand had reached in. I tried to scream, but I couldn't. I tried to move, but I couldn't. From the window, and living bundle of hair, I saw the face that confirmed my fears. It was my mother. She had no eyes, just deep black holes. Her skin was white, a deep white that left only blue veins unveiled underneath it. Only some of her skin was blackened where it appeared to have been ripped or torn. Some of the black existed on her face where it appeared death had ripped free her cheeks. When she opened her mouth, the tongue nearly fell out with no lips or teeth to conceal it. Max. Then his mother crawled from the window onto the ceiling. I heard the box shaking. I turned quickly, or was forced to. There, in my absolute terror, I saw an arm reaching up out of the box. Then, like a zombie crawling from a grave, this human being-looking thing forced its chest and arms and hips out of the box. Max! I started to cry. The thing crawled completely out of the box and began to roll around on the floor violently. Then it smashed its head on the ground several times and sprung up from its feet in the quickest motion I have ever seen any creature make. It stood frigidly still. From the violent motion of that strange stillness, then it looked at me and I saw it was my grandfather. He too was missing his eyes, and the white skin seemed to hang off him like slabs of meat. I saw the veins and blackening muscles pulsating atop dried bones. I think it was smiling at me. My grandfather was smiling at me. Max! I felt two cold hands grab my neck. I turned slowly to see who had put me in their grasp. From the ceiling, my mother looked down on my hysterical actions as I tried to break free from the grip of my father. My father. He too was decaying and staring at me with no eyes in his skull. He gripped my neck tighter. Then from behind his dried lips he revealed two thick fangs darting out from his cracked skull. He unhinged his jaw and nearly swallowed my neck when he bit me. He let go and I stumbled back into the others closing in on me. I looked at my father's cold stare, thinking only of those words, my father's words. Max, did you see what you came to see? Hey everybody, thanks for listening. This is Knial Piper. I hope you enjoyed this, and stay tuned for more stories from Knial Piper, including the book The Demonic Virtue, coming out on YouTube, chapter by chapter. Read quality, read Knial Piper. Thanks for listening.